I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there changes to the agenda? Okay, calling for public comment. And our one item, solid waste assessments on tax statements. JP, are you going to lead us in this, or?
Good morning. I was going to say, I believe Jamila is going to begin speaking to this issue.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jamila Holmes for the record. I'm a civil deputy prosecutor. I wanted to give the board a broad overview of what the tax process is for the county. In advance, pardon me. I do want to submit for the record the emails that the assessor sent, the most recent at 10:43 p.m. on Friday night. I think it's relevant to our discussion today. So the county's tax process requires action by each elected official save for the coroner, the prosecutor, and the sheriff. All of those actions obviously don't occur in a vacuum. They build upon each other. So I pulled up the IAC's Assessor manual, which really kind of clearly sets forth what the 4 basic steps are for processing property taxes in the county. The first step being that of the assessor. The assessment is the first step, and everything else flows therefrom. The assessor is required to, or all county property, I should say, is required to be on assessment rolls. And the deadlines for submission of the assessment rolls to the BOE, to essentially this board, and the mailing of assessment notices is set forth by statute. Property that for which building is completed subsequent to those deadlines, or properties that were missed by the assessor are still to be assessed, and the assessor must deliver to the clerk this missed property roll by the first Monday in January. So once the assessments are turned over to the clerk auditor, the clerk performs the second step, which is the calculation of taxes. The clerk is to calculate the actual tax dollar amount, and that includes, beyond the assessed value, fees for services provided, including the solid waste fee and recreational fees. And this is also where the circuit breaker program modifier is checked. The collection and billing, or the billing and collection, is then performed by the treasurer. That's the third step. Each of the 2 installment payments payable on real property are paid to the treasurer. And the clerk then performs the final step as auditor, which is the distribution of tax dollars to the taxing districts. And that's obviously after properties have been assessed, tax burdens have been determined, and taxes are collected. So this process requires the 4 elected officials that I've mentioned, each performing their statutory duties.
Can you just state number 2 again?
Number 2 is the clerk's calculation of taxes.
Okay.
And I pulled up, or I looked at other county solid waste ordinances for counties outside of, or other than Kootenai County. And if the board is interested, Idaho County and Minidoka County specifically also speak to the assessor's role in this, and it's the same as what has always been happening in Kootenai County prior to the current assessor. So, like in those other counties, the solid waste fee is collected in conjunction with property taxes by the treasurer, and that occurs after assessment of the fees by the assessor through identification of residential or domestic users. In Kootenai County, we specifically exempt via the solid waste fee resolution non-occupiable dwellings. it's been my experience that elected officials jealously guard their statutory duties and the information that they use in order to perform those duties. Here, based on the emails that I've submitted in the record, it looks like the assessor, it appears to me that the assessor is disclaiming any kind of proprietary or confidential information in terms of his assessment roles and is giving the board, either directly or through its information technology department, broad access to all of that information. I would submit that he can do that. That's simply an odd position to take. So given that the assessor has opened up his database to the board, there's certainly nothing in statute that would prevent another elected official from adding the solid waste fee increment modifier. It's just not the process that has occurred. And specifically to, I now defer to JP and our Chief Deputy Treasurer, Jill Smith, as to what's actually occurred here on the ground. But I did want to provide the board with a broad overview of where we find ourselves.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Phillips for the record. So for some context, it was recently discovered by Angela Bergeson, our business and finance manager, that many properties across Kootenai County were not billed for solid waste fees as in previous tax years. The Solid Waste Department did reach directly out to the assessor's office in an attempt to get a better understanding of what may have occurred. After a limited investigation, Bela Kovacs confirmed that several thousand properties were not assessed solid waste fees in this previous tax roll, or as the same as previous tax rolls, I should say. It was first reported that the fees were inadvertently removed from 2,000 plus parcels. It's also my understanding that fees were flat out removed from several thousand additional parcels. I believe these numbers today were more clearly broken down and defined. Currently, the Solid Waste Department does not know the extent of the errors or the reasoning as to why the assessor's office removed so many solid waste assessments without contacting our department. The Solid Waste Department for over 30 years has depended on the assessor's office and the treasurer's office to work together to collect these fees for our department. And in all honesty, it's worked out very well over the many years. Admittedly, it's not perfect, but it has worked out very well for our department. The Solid Waste Department would like this practice to continue, but would also like this current issue or these errors to be fixed. I believe Jill Smith from the Treasurer's Office has put together a sound plan on how to proceed with rectifying this issue, and I would pass this on to Jill at this time.
Jill Smith for the record, Chief Deputy Treasurer. I've discussed this with Angela. I've touched base with Julina briefly, but that conversation needs to be, we need to flesh the beginning to end out more thoroughly, but I didn't want to go too deep in the weeds until we were certain that the VOCC was going to recommend that we move forward and collect these fees. We proposed that we collect them outside of Aumentum. We already collect commercial solid waste fees outside of Aumentum. It would be not, this would be an emergency plan, this would be a Band-Aid, this would be a one-time only, where we collect the fees basically using a spreadsheet. The disadvantage to putting the fees in Aumentum, and unfortunately the assessor, before talking to my office or the BOCC, looped XTR in and had them do an analysis. I could have saved the county $1,700 by telling him from the get-go that the plan that he was moving forward with was not the best plan. But XTR's analysis resulted in us finding out that the only way for those fees to be added in Aumentum is now for us to add them manually as a tax charge adjustment. It's, you know, anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 accounts. For 2,000 accounts, XTR estimates 60 hours of just manual entry, We are already behind with regard to the June 20th collection deadline because I have yet to receive the occupancy roll that I should have had in my hands at the first week in January. So those bills have not been sent yet. We just got the personal property subsequent rollout middle of March because that was when I got the final roll for personal property. The PP2 is what we call it. So we are sort of squished and running out of time between now and June, and that's just my office's issue. The bigger picture to me is this year, we have looked bad several times on the front page of the paper because of errors that have happened and been identified at the last minute, and then we've had to regroup and fix them. If we were to put these fees into Aumentum, the thing, we aren't able to create separate bills out of Aumentum. It's a property tax billing system. So the bill that this fee would go on is the property tax bill. So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the person that paid their taxes in full in December, and now they're gonna get a reminder for $88. You can also put yourself in the shoes of the person that paid first half, and they pull up their second half stub, and it doesn't match the amount on the reminder we've just sent. And to me, that would be confusing, and it makes us look like we don't know what we're doing. And it's going to cause taxpayers to question the integrity of the bills they're receiving. So what we propose is billing, if the BOCC decides that they'd like to go forward, we'd like to send basically a letter, and maybe the bill, maybe the amount's included in the letter, maybe it's a separate piece of paper, but send a separate bill for solid waste. I would request that we do this after the June 20th property tax payment deadline, again, because we don't want to send several bills, and for the people with occupancy, they're going to be getting an occupancy a month before 2 weeks before they get their reminder, and throwing another piece of paper in the mix, I think it's more likely it won't get paid. But also this will be anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 payments that we need to process, and having that work come into the office after the June 20th pay deadline will allow us to process those more expediently and to make sure that we can process the tax payments timely as well.
Okay. Bill, questions?
Yeah, 2,000 to 5,000. Tell me what that means in terms of dollars.
If it's 5,000, it's roughly $440,000.
And what is if it's 2,000?
I think it was about 141.
Okay,
because
that's good enough. That's good.
12 of the condominiums have PTR.
I just want to get an idea what we're
Yeah.
talking. It's not a few $1,000s.
No, and it's not
for people who are watching,
$10,000.
especially, this is important money for the county that we count on. How did you find this, JP?
Angela Burgess had discovered it.
How did you find it?
So, well, I was looking at our revenue because I like to make sure that things are coming in the way that they should and
Yeah.
the way that was planned in, we go through the budget process right now. We're working on FY25, starting that planning. And I wanted to start budgeting for revenue. And I was like, okay, well, what is our growth pattern? These are all the things that we look at. You've got to look at the patterns of the numbers. And every year, for the past quite a few years, as you know, we've had growth in our county, quite a lot. And so you can see where, as we're, doing the solid waste fee on each residential parcel, you see a percentage growth. And and when I looked at the time, I compared, okay, well, this is what we were at this year. Here's where we're at this year. Why is it a drop?
So you're the reason we're here.
I found a drop.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I think it is also important to point out that even though some parcels have structures on them it's reported no one lives in, there are people that own property that come in and want to pay the solid waste fee because they are generating garbage on those properties or cleaning up those properties. So they'll come into our department over the many years that departments existed and then asked to pay the solid waste fee so they can use the transfer stations and get a sticker for their window, even if they have out-of-state plates or out-of-county plates. And so those are difficult for other offices to account for, even though Ange enters those into the system so that the assessor can bill for those in the future. It's unclear how many of those may have been
Well,
removed.
Yeah, I don't enter them, but so like say a customer comes in and they have a bare piece of property with a dock. You know, a lot of people have that, it's nothing there, but they come and they'll bring their motor home and they'll do their property cleanup and recreate as they should on their property, but they are generating waste. And they want to do the right thing, they're going to use our facilities, they want to have the window stickers so that they can do it responsibly. And so then they would come in and they would pay the $88 to be able to use it for that year. But instead of coming to us each year to pay that to us, they're like, no, go ahead and put that on the property so that it can just be billed with taxes and it's automatic. We don't have to worry about it each year and it just goes forward. So when that happens, then we send a email to the assessors, please, you know, however you do it, because I don't know their process, please assess the residential solid waste fee on this property. So there are some that there is no dwelling, but it's because of an agreement and the property owner doing the right thing and paying for their services.
Excellent work.
So that does happen.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with Jill's assessment on what we should do and how we should do it. I think that it's got to be frustrating for people to get multiple bills with different numbers, and but it is the pathway of least resistance, I think, if we wait until June. I do have some questions for our attorney, though, because I want to understand what it means for the assessor to open up their database for us, and what does it mean moving forward, because the way I kind of understand it is that the assessor is saying it's not our statutory duty to collect fees or do these assessments for solid waste, and that someone else needs to do it, because I'm only going to do what Idaho law tells me I have to do, irrespective of how it affects the balance of the county. Am I correct in that thinking?
That is also how, pardon me, that's also how I interpret the email that the assessor sent. The problem is that an assessment comes first. And any modifiers that are added, and it's my understanding that this is actually a ministerial act of simply checking a box or highlighting a line item such that the solid waste increment is added. But that necessarily presupposes accurate and correct information being inputted by the assessor. And I think that's where the breakdown occurred, so very early in the process. The unilateral decision by the assessor to deem certain properties not eligible for that modifier or for the solid waste increment isn't something that's been discussed with solid waste. And so I don't know that I can answer your question, because I don't know what the assessor's reasoning was.
Okay, so, but the assessor checks these properties that are supposed to have this solid waste fee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm assuming then, because he's opening up his database, that another elected official is going to have to go in and check those properties that are due the solid waste fee, or to be assessed the fee?
Commissioner Matari, could I address that?
Yeah.
So right now, the majority of the solid waste fees are added to the parcels that are on the occupancy roll, because that's how we pick up that something now is occupied and it's generating solid waste. And the occupancy tax is prorated by the number of months that a person has lived in the home. At the same time, the solid waste fee is prorated for the first year. So all of this is happening really pretty much, it should be happening pretty much at the same time. At the point in which the assessor turns over their role to the treasurer's office internally in the tax system so that we can calculate the taxes, by the time it hits my office, we can't add the modifier, it's too late. And I, in the email that the assessor sent Friday evening, he mentioned something about an email from Mary Bidwell in 2022. It wasn't attached. I couldn't read it. I'm not certain. I don't remember an email from 2022, but I do remember in 21 or 22, we had an issue with the occupancy roll, and they had neglected to put the solid waste fee on, and they did have to engage Stan Brennan because it was too late, and the only way to do that was to hard script that fee into those parcels so that we could create a bill that included the fee. I don't know if that helps you or not.
A little bit. Apparently the assessor is claiming that since 2018, we've had this problem. Has there been any evidence to suggest that that has been the case?
I am not aware of any problem, and he also addressed the part, he mentioned that the assessor's database is fine and the issue is with the treasurer's database. To be clear, there is one database and we share it. There's no assessor's side and treasurer's side. There's the assessor's side to the functions he performs, and then there's the treasurer's side to the functions we perform. But the database is shared.
I believe he's conflating the issues regarding, it looks like he's trying to find an escape route in excusing the errors made by the Assessor's Department. Back to your question regarding allowing another elected official to perform this duty, it is going to create some challenges as it relates to the permissions allowed by the system and distinguishing between, okay, does this permission allow us to make just a modifier change, or is it much broader than that? So I think he's kind of abdicating his entire responsibility over the values in the system itself by granting this permission to some other elected official, whether it's be the BOCC, the treasurer. I suppose it could be solid waste. I'm not sure what he's thinking.
Do we have any examples of other counties where the assessor does not perform this function that we could emulate? Because I'm assuming moving forward, we're going to have to emulate another county.
I have an example, and it's the one that the assessor has referenced. He references Canyon County, where the collection is happening at the dump. And he has mentioned that that would be something that we could do, and that would remove the assessor's office from the process.
Which obviously is problematic for Kootenai County, because if you transfer that collection at the dump, what you're going to create is a situation where people are going to say, well, I'm not going to go pay a fee. I'm going to go dump it out in the national forest instead.
So what the assessor wants to do is he wants to change the way solid waste is being paid for from the taxpayer to actually collecting the fees at the gate,
That was something he had mentioned in one of his emails, yes.
which would eliminate probably these drop-off dumpsters throughout the county.
The rural
because-
collection sites?
Yeah, the rural collection sites, because you'd have to collect money now.
So these other counties that they're referring to have tipping fees for every load that comes across the gate. So I believe
Yes.
that's what he's referring to, is that if you come to the transfer stations, he was suggesting that we charge for every pound.
But the rural collection sites couldn't collect.
If you
Fees.
did that, you'd have to close them all.
You'd have to close them all.
Because otherwise they'd be overrun.
So his recommendation is to close all the rural collection sites and then have a tipping fee whenever someone shows up to the,
Yeah, he may not be suggesting to close them, but we would be forced to if we were to
well,
switch to
that's the
that system.
consequence
Yes,
of his
yes.
recommendation.
Well, and I think the consequences of people dumping their refuse throughout the county is
Well, it opens the door for sure.
absolutely.
It
If someone
incents
can
that
save
to
the
a degree.
fee of, they're going to.
And I have a question that I don't know, maybe Jamila can answer. To me, at the point in time that this county decided how they were going to collect solid waste, there was some sort of agreement between the commissioners, the treasurer, the assessor, the auditor, that we were willing to put this system into place and make it work. And there are a lot of things that we do every day that aren't outlined in statute. To me, statute is a broad umbrella, and it gives us boundaries, and it gives us guidance, but statute doesn't tell us what to do for every business process, and statute can't have anticipated what would be needed 30, 40, 50 years from when it was written. I struggle with, if this is how this program was set up for Kootenai County, whether that particular duty is listed in statute or not. It was a decision that was made, and as a new elected official, I don't think that it's reasonable to walk in and say, this thing that's worked for 30 years until now, I just am not going to do
Let
anything.
me make a comment on that, because I think the absurdity of this request by the assessor needs to be kind of pointed out. There's lots of things that we all do as elected officials for other departments. For example, community development, which is another BOCC department, assists the assessor in a number of different ways. They do lot adjustments to make sure that the mapping is aware of this. They do annexations. In fact, there was a recent error just a couple weeks ago regarding the city of Rathrum, where 400 acres had been annexed. It was not correct, or wasn't identified by the assessor, but it was identified by community development. The IMS system that they use is open book for them, so they can identify what kind of permits have been issued in the process of development, so that they know that their records are now comprehensive when they go to the valuation process. We can talk about the maintenance department and what they do for different departments. This attempt by the assessor is concerning, to say the least.
And if I could add, the assessor appears to seek formal MOUs and/or contracts between various departments. I would note that obviously the Board of Commissioners is the only entity that can sue or be sued on behalf of the county. And so my advice has always been, let's do a memorandum for record, but no MOU or contract between, for example, the treasurer and the Board of Commissioners has any value realistically. And so that's why the assessor is unable to pinpoint a specific MOU between solid waste, which is the board, and any other entity within the county.
How come the assessor is not here?
Excellent question.
You got
I
me?
think when this was set up, it was mostly a board and solid waste thing.
It's more to bring it to your attention that this has happened so that we can get an idea how you would like us to proceed or move forward. Do we want to try to collect? Do we want to just there are different ways we could go about this. And it's really your call. And
It seems like we should be looking at entertaining what Jill has suggested with the collection for this year, for the error that has occurred. But it also sounds like we need to have a meeting with the assessor to discuss what's going to happen moving forward. Because I think an initial suggestion that says we need to capture a tipping fee, a scale fee at the transfer stations, and not have an assessment, a fee assessed throughout the county for the property owners, will lead to immense consequences, adverse consequences for this county. And so I don't see that as being realistic at all at this point. It won't serve the taxpayers well.
And on another note, it has been mentioned that maybe solid waste could take over the management of that modifier. He's mentioned that the treasurer's office could take over management of that modifier. Modifiers are used for more than just the solid waste fees. Modifiers are used to put the homeowner's exemption in place. The
circuit breaker.
And for me, the idea of someone from an office that doesn't understand how all of those things work together, touching those things, will inevitably lead to some sort of error. And how big it is, I can't predict, but it terrifies me.
You're correct that you cannot give other people access to databases to make changes when they're not responsible for the entirety of the database. You want that to be encapsulated with people who are supposed to know what they're doing.
And as we followed that practice as a county, we wouldn't be in this situation right now, ironically.
You're correct that you
Due to the
cannot
assessor
give
making modifier changes, not knowing what the ramifications were.
Yeah.
Somebody's joined us by phone.
Yeah, this is Bela Kovacs, the assessor.
All right. Hang on one second. Mr. Snow, did you have anything to add?
No, came up with questions.
Okay, great. Would you like?
No, I'm done right now. Thank you all.
Yep. All right, so you have direction. I don't know if this is we put it as an action, yeah, we did put it as an action item, so if, the treasurer would probably be more comfortable if we made a motion to,
Actually, I think it's solid waste first. I think
Okay.
they would like their money. And then once you've given the direction that we do want to pursue collection of those fees, then we'll follow those instructions and figure out the best route. Again, it's probably going to be a letter. And I believe I am going to take the stance that I would like to go out under my name. And so I can control exactly what the message is.
okay. All right, motion?
Do you not want to let him?
Well, it's up to you, I thought you were done, so I don't.
Oh,
what-
no,
what do you wanna
I think he's here.
Yeah.
I think not giving him an opportunity to speak, it would actually not really be productive.
do? No, that's fine, we had public comment, so I didn't know where you were going when you said you were done.
Commissioners, I have one further clarification when you're creating this resolution. We have I think they ended up changing the number to 1,600 and change condominiums that without a doubt should be assessed the solid waste fee. There's a minimum of 3,400 parcels that they're saying the solid waste fee should not have been assessed. But to my knowledge, the solid waste department has not been given the opportunity to do any sort of analysis. Maybe the fee is due, maybe the fee is not due. So do we need to address those two sets of parcels separately? If we're gonna send a bill, I'd like to do it once and be done with it.
With your permission, what would be nice is to work hand in hand to where if one of the records that we had asked about was a list of the things that were assessed in tax years 21, 22, and 23, just so it would be easy to analyze, what was assessed before and what was assessed most recent to see what was dropped or what was removed so that we can figure out and then look at those individually to make sure that we are only doing this once. So it'd be nice to be able to have a chance to analyze that so that they can be.
Theoretically, with the bills going out after June, you have plenty of time to work together. Okay? Okay, anything else before I? Okay, okay, Mr. Kovacs. Comments?
Commissioners, this is Bela Kovacs, Assessor. I have not monitored the entirety of this discussion, so I don't have complete context. I have picked up on a few comments and observations that were made, which are completely false. And so, we should discuss this at a later opportunity. I will tell you that the statements I heard about unilaterally making changes without notification, that's simply not true. There were meetings between my staff and the solid waste department. The statements how the assessor is relinquishing all access to the database, the proprietary database, is utterly false. That is not what I proposed at all. And various other statements. What I have tried to do is I've tried to help be a problem solver in trying to address this issue. I learned that there have been audits that were done annually since around the time frame of 2017. I don't have any records that I was able to detect prior to that. I did uncover an email, which I will be sharing with the board, that was circulated. Jill Smith was copied on that email in February of 2022, which addressed a very similar issue. And as far as I can tell from the history, the audits that do occur, they look like they're initiated, from as far as I can tell, through the IT department, where a spreadsheet is reviewed by staff, and then the increment is either modified, either a 1 or a 0.5 or a 0.75 or different percentages, or a null, and then that information is then populated back into the system. I cannot explain, I don't have context as to why it's done the way it has been done since 2017. I don't see any record when that audit was done as to whether or not solid waste has played a part in that after that audit was done. My staff informs me that this past year, the audit that we are now talking about, it was reviewed with the solid waste department. The criteria that was reviewed was essentially presented to my staff, and it was a collaborative effort. We are not the solid waste department, and so the criteria in which the fees or the increment is applied or not really depends upon the knowledge of the solid waste operations. I don't know that the assessor's office has been performing that function historically to determine whether or not the properties are producing solid waste. So I think more discussion needs to occur. And so I had not had the opportunity to review this in depth. So I just wanted to clarify that a lot of the information that has been presented to the board this morning is not accurate.
Kayla, this is Steve. You said you haven't had a lot of time to review this information yet. I received several lengthy emails over the weekend describing this whole process. Help me understand the disconnect where you haven't been involved.
Over the weekend?
Yes.
Okay. From whom?
From you.
Yeah, but that was over the weekend, Steve. My attorney has been out all week. I have tried to review matters with my attorney. I arranged to have a conference call with XTR to learn a little bit more about the processes and what can be done and what cannot be done. That happened earlier in the week, but I'm still, and I have been in the stages of fact finding.
Assessor Kovacs?
I did also, Commissioner, I also did ask for a copy of any agreement. I did not pick up all of what Jamila has said about the agreement or the MOU, if there is one, but I'm looking for information to try and discern how these processes are supposed to operate.
Assessor Kovacs?
Yes.
You make the comment that you try to be a problem solver. And the problem I have with that statement is that problem solvers generally lead and get people rallied together once a problem is identified so that we can fix it. And I haven't seen that from you, and I'm sorry, but I just haven't. And the fact is...
Well, you haven't seen it because I did actually do that, and I have an email from Jill Smith where she asked me to step out of this, that she would take it on from this point forward. So I had actually taken the initiative to try and resolve the issue and find out what was going on so that I could come to Jill with a workable solution. But the Treasurer's Office didn't really want any part of that.
No, I'm talking about with the board. I'm talking about coming to the board, setting up a meeting and saying, hey, we have an issue. It looks like it could affect upwards of $400,000 in revenue. I'm on it. We need to figure out the details of this, but I'm on it, and I have every intention of working with all the departments so that we can get this resolved quickly. That is the difference.
Well, I was doing that.
You haven't done it. You might be working. I've been getting emails from you too. You sent me one on Easter Sunday. So you have time. You just aren't making it productive time with the rest of the elected officials.
Can I say?
Well, that is...
Okay,
Bela,
hold on. Let Jill speak.
Bela, you said you're a problem solver and you took the lead. Part of being a problem solver is that you don't decide how to solve a problem for another department. You ask for their input at the beginning. And as I said, instead you wasted over $1,700 on XTR doing an analysis. And that leads me to another question since it came up. When I saw the commissioners approve the contract for XTR, there were very specific projects listed. And yet again, those dollars that you approved so that we could move forward with the system and solve issues within the system are now being spent because instead of picking up the phone and calling you or calling my office or calling IT, the first phone call is made to XTR and they don't work for free.
So your perception is incorrect, Jill.
Okay.
The contract that we have with XTR did not delete the prior body of work. It's indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery contract, time and materials, and it allows us to resolve other issues as well. It's a very broad, general scope of work that has not been deleted by subsequent modifications.
Is it possible to try to solve these problems in-house before we go to XTR next time?
So the reason for reaching out to XTR was we had the understanding that if we're going to bill for a fee, then there needs to be a way to track and collect and monitor whether those fees have been collected and are they delinquent. For those reasons, it made sense that those numbers had to be in the system.
Okay, but Bela,
And so
you didn't
what
ask.
we knew needed to happen is they needed to be billed. I did check with legal counsel to see if it was acceptable to bill for those. I wanted to come to Jill with a solution and to have some possibilities laid out in front of her. I never intended to make the decision as to what would happen. So I wanted to do some background investigation first, which is what I was doing.
Yeah, Baylor, this is Steve. You have made the decision that you no longer want to control the modifiers, correct? I'll take that as a yes. Thank you.
No, that's not the decision that's been made. I was proposing some ideas. We do need to have a conversation about this.
You think?
May I speak to the audit that he referenced? So what Bela was talking about as far as a solid waste audit, yes, I work with the assessor's office to do an audit. It is on commercial properties, not residential. There's a very big difference. When he was saying a partial increment or a full, or whether it was a half or a quarter, or so here's a scenario just to get, so everyone understands. Residential is a single dwelling home up to a fourplex. A fourplex is assessed 4 residential units, 1 for each. An $88 assessment on each unit. Commercial does not get assessed by and large. There are some instances where it is. And those are what we look at because they are different. It's not as easy as saying this is a usable dwelling. It gets assessed, which is our ordinance and what we follow. That is all that they need to do, is just on those single dwellings up to a fourplex. Beyond a fourplex, it's commercial, just like a commercial business. Those, they don't pay on their property taxes, they pay by their use. By if they have a 6-yard container that's being picked up 1 time a week, they pay us directly through the solid waste AR for that waste disposal. There are instances where we put a commercial assessment on. For instance, there are very few, but so say a business, they're one who obviously is there, they generate waste. They prefer to come to the solid waste department and dispose of their waste outside of having a hauler. So they don't have service at their business. But they also have 0 showing that they pay for the garbage being brought to us. Maybe they say it's residential, however that is. Or they're one who did have an account, but they've shown that they're not a great payer. So instead of billing them through the AR, it's like, okay, they just have a 96-gallon container. We're just going to do a quarter assessment on them, which would cover that year's use.
But essentially, the audit's for commercial and not for residential.
That's all that
And
audit
the-
is.
And the mistake right now today is residential.
Correct.
Okay. So,
Well, the email history that I'm talking about that was issued by Matt Snow talks about how IT does not know and they have not been able to detect why the solid waste fees are coming off in the system. it is a problem with the way the data transfers from the assessor's table to the table that is managed and controlled by the treasurer, and then it transitions to yet another table within the treasurer side of the database. And I'm using the phrasing of, yes, I realize it's one database, but there are different tables where the data is managed, and the different departments have control over the different tables. According to this email, the problem, and these are not my words, and I'm paraphrasing what I recall the email saying, Matt Snow says that IT has not been able to detect the problem. They don't understand or know why the increments are being dropped or being omitted. And then when the billings go out, even though they're billings on residential properties, when the billings are issued, they have no increments on them. Somehow the data is getting lost in the transition between the different tables in the system, and apparently IT's not been able to detect it. This is probably related to the customizations Kootenai County has made to its computer system, and they have not been able to resolve it since 2017. That same email, Matt Snow estimated that the cost of fixing this 2 years ago would have been about $175,000.
Again, I think you're conflating two different issues, Bela, but as you suggested, let's continue this conversation, and we can go ahead and dig into the details.
I don't believe I'm conflating, because the email is about solid waste fees and audits, and it discusses all of the same terminology. Apparently it's an ongoing issue that Kootenai County has been aware of, and there have been accounts that have been getting billed solid waste fees that appear that they should not have been getting billed them. And so it looks like some of the billings have been erroneous over the years.
It would have been nice if we could have had a copy of that email before today.
Well, you were copied on it, Jill. You were copied on it back in 2014, I'm sorry, 2022.
Yeah, February of 2022. I apologize, I don't remember that email.
So
I didn't even know about it. I wasn't even copied on it until I did some searching and found it.
Okay, so Bela, I think we are doing two different issues. Today, right now, we are dealing with what has happened and how do we deal with these up to $5,000 or 5,000 properties that need to be billed. So that's issue one. We have a good path forward there. Issue two is how are we going to treat solid waste fees in the future? So that can be a separate meeting.
I agree, it should be another meeting, but I would like to add that Angela just went through a very lengthy explanation about whether or not and how and why solid waste fees should or shouldn't be applied. And I think that's very indicative of what has to happen. Somebody with knowledge and expertise in matters pertaining to solid waste needs to be involved in making those decisions. And I don't know how those decisions have been made in the past, and why they're getting applied and why they're not. So we do need to get to the bottom, and that's why having a memorandum is helpful for some documented processes.
Yes, so Jamila, can you just briefly restate what you talked about, why there aren't MOUs between all 44 departments in the county?
The Board of Commissioners.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. The Board of Commissioners is the only entity that can sue or be sued on behalf of Kootenai County.
So that's the reason to not document processes?
Documenting processes and having an MOU sound like two different things to me. So we will go ahead and get another meeting scheduled, and we will confer with Solid Waste to see if they would like a representative there so we can get all these questions answered. And at this next meeting, I'd like to know why, if you've been documenting processes for 4 years that you've been here, why this is the first time that we've heard about this one. So hopefully that can be.
I've not been documenting these for 4 years. I was not even aware of this email until this weekend when I discovered it.
Yeah, I have one question for you, Assessor Kovacs.
I just discovered the email on Friday.
Okay, all right.
And how many years is it going to be?
And I was not copied on it.
How many years are you going to have to be an assessor in this county until you understand?
So I have the same
where this is
question.
Supposed to go, because quite frankly, I get tired of hearing this stuff from you. You've been here for a long time. Okay, you should have the answers by now. All right.
Are you there? I cannot hear you.
All right, I think that we have our direction, so if there is a motion, I would take that.
I move that we approve the solid waste assessments on the tax statements to go out.
Not on the tax
To go as a separate statement and to work with our treasurer's office on coordinating that.
Yes.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right, public comment? Okay, 11:50, meeting adjourned. Thank you, folks.